Got it set up nicely there. Thanks for coming, everyone, and it really is a pleasure to see you all. Um, it's quite difficult sometimes to sort of dedicate time to doing this sort of thing because we're having to slow down, and it kind of goes against the grain of our energy, of our striving energy of wanting to get things done and finding something else to do, or perhaps just wanting to switch off or whatever. But I do really appreciate the support. So we've been going over the last. This is rule 3 now. This is the third week on this series of 5 rules for inner peace, and I've decided I want to change the word rule because I find it's a little bit too strict, a little bit too rigid. And I've not come up with the word doors, but I think door is a more appropriate word for this. I've thought about ways or paths, which both have appeal, but doors, they give us a clear image of something that we can do something with. And stepping through a door can be, associated with a transformation. And with these 5 doors that, we're discussing door 3 today, the 5 doors, they all open into the same room, which is this inner peace. And the other thing I like about the door analogy is sometimes we just need to be shown the door and we can walk straight through ourselves. Other times we might need a little bit of help to find the key. And then other times the door is just jammed so tightly shut that we have to find another way in. We can use one of the other doors. And luckily for us, there's 5. And as we've recognized already, a lot of them overlap. There's a lot of overlapping features with these doors. But sometimes one might feel more appropriate than the other. For example, last week it was rule 2 then, but it's door 2 now, was every step I take is an opportunity for growth. There are no wrong turns. And while that is true, sometimes we find we're so tightly bound to the past through difficult emotions or traumatic experiences that sometimes we just can't let go. We can't let go of it. We're consumed by it. So we don't need to fight it or beat ourselves up for not getting it. We can just try another door. And the first door of self-compassion, the I'm deserving of care and I'm capable of caring for myself. And it's quite helpful that that's the first one we try, because building that foundation of compassion is going to help us with all the other doors. And in that moment of being immersed in a difficult emotion, a difficult feeling, that's when we are most deserving of that care, most deserving of that compassion. And we need to hold ourselves gently with love and without expectation or trying to change our experience. And our opportunity for peace lies in our relationship to our experience. And this is what door number 3 focuses on. And it's our attitude to our experience that determines our level of peace. And to summarize, last week we looked at the inherent madness of holding on to negative past experiences and then the subsequent liberation of letting them go. And we looked at the futility of wishing the past to be different, like wishing alone can change anything. and then looked at the possibility of treating each moment as an opportunity for growth. And this is where door 3 opens up, really. And the question we can pose to ourselves is, how am I treating this moment? How am I treating this moment? Because whatever is happening is arising. And if we look carefully, we might see there's a subtle inner reaction to this arising or this experience. And our peace in any moment is governed or determined by this subtle reaction. Now, usually we only notice something if it disturbs us. If we don't want what is here, or we want what isn't here, then we get disturbed. And there are obviously layers to this, but it's either a like or dislike thing. And this liking or disliking this moment sets off a sequence of behaviors or actions that keep us connected to these habitual patterns of suffering. And an example is, sometimes there's just a natural feeling of sadness or a little bit of emptiness. Might feel like boredom, might feel like anxiety. And in that moment, we're unwilling to reside in that feeling. So we reach for something, we reach for a form of distraction, whether it's ending up at the fridge, grabbing the phone, having a glass of wine, having some chocolate, whatever it is. We're not to vilify any of those things, but sometimes we're doing it to distract ourselves, to avoid feeling something. And that works temporarily. Well, it masks that feeling for a moment. But then, of course, that fades. And then again, we're sitting in that feeling of, a little bit less than, not feeling quite good enough or quite right. And we may spend our lives unconsciously running to and from what happens and wonder why we don't feel at peace. If we're constantly moving like this, then there isn't enough stillness. And this kind of searching, we can even do it in a meditation or in this kind of spiritual realm. This searching or seeking, this activity of looking or pursuing, is actually the opposite of peace. So the thing is, we all have our own unique criterion of what makes this moment acceptable. And this is based on the unique pattern of experiences that make up our past. And each one of us has a different one. We have a different journey, all of us, that brought us here. And that includes past experiences, but it also includes genetics. And it is Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and their focus this week this year is on anxiety. So I'd like to bring that in as an example of how we relate to our experience. You may experience anxiety, you may not, all to sort of varying degrees. But we can be predisposed to anxiety through our genetics, and there's actually a number of studies on twins that suggest genetics can account for between 30 and 50% of anxiety symptoms. And obviously we don't have any choice over that. And then we add into that, maybe a few traumatic experiences when we were growing up, maybe a slightly unstable upbringing. Again, things that we didn't really have control over. And then the likelihood that we're going to become anxious goes up even more. But we often blame ourselves for it, or we often judge ourselves for it. But really, it's certainly not our fault. It's genetic and experiential. And speaking from my own experience of anxiety, for me, it feels like, my heart tightens up a bit. I get a bit of a pain in my chest. I might get sweaty palms. I might feel like my legs feel a bit weak, or my tummy feels a bit disturbed. And in that moment, there seems to be an accompanying narrative of you're weak, you're not good enough, there's something wrong with you, you can't cope. And this leads to sort of more anxiety, more overwhelm. So this is the kind of blame, this is blaming myself for feeling this way and then getting lost in that experience. So this is really where mindfulness is really helpful, because it helps us to develop awareness, and awareness is our superpower. So in the case of that situation, or whatever emotion it is that you're feeling, we can ask ourselves, can I notice what's happening? It's a pretty simple thing to say, but it's not very easy to do, especially when in the heat of something. What can I notice about what's happening now? So we have to pause, obviously. We have to stop and go, right, what is it? And for me, say anxiety. Anxiety's here. The symptoms of it are here. And what is my inner response to this experience? And more often than not, before I know it, I've gone into resistance, or I've gone into judgment about it. So, first question is, can I notice what's happening now? Second question is, what is my inner response to this experience? And it's usually resistance or judgment. I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I'm this kind of person because of this feeling. And this is our opportunity really to try something else. So the anxiety's here. We can't change that's here, but we can change our attitude towards it. Can we welcome it in? Hello, anxiety. Welcome, thanks for coming. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to practice some mindfulness. Thanks for keeping me alive. Thanks for everything. And how can I help? So we soften to our experience. We stop resisting what is here. And then we hold it. We hold this collection or constellation of feelings or sensations or thoughts, and we hold it without any expectation that it will change. And we hold it without any judgment. Now, it's not our place to negotiate with this. We're not saying, okay, and this happens, I do it myself a lot. Anxiety, you're here. Now I'm going to welcome you in if you quickly bugger off afterwards. That's not quite the acceptance I'm talking about here. It's completely unconditional. And now sometimes that won't change anything, but often it does change. It softens something, but we don't use that as the motivation for it. Because if our motivation for this is to change it, then we're not accepting it. We're still resisting it. And you'll know, because you'll still feel that energy of resistance. It'll still be present. So we can develop awareness. This is like the first step, is developing awareness through our practices like mindfulness. And when we stop and ask those questions, we're creating space. And we're giving ourselves an opportunity to respond differently. We're choosing a different path. The automatic reactions aren't working for us in most cases. But sometimes in life we do need to act, and it's not just about Okay, this is stress, I'm going to stop. And, it has to be appropriate. You don't analyze if a car's coming towards you and sit there and wonder why you're getting anxious. You just get out the way. This is a considered appropriate amount of reflection. So whatever's here is here. What do I do with it is the question. This is how I feel. How do I treat this feeling? How do I treat this thought? And from a slightly different angle, on the level of ownership, we're only experiencing things this way because we've previously agreed this to be true, whether we know it or not. And we're constantly referring to this self-created measure of truth to determine whether we can be at peace with this or not. So we're relying on this kind of haphazard patterning from the past, this haphazard conditioning, the things that we often had little or no control over, to determine our peace in this moment. I'll only be at peace if A, B, or C is this, that, or the next thing. And we can verify this because if we had been brought up in a different place, if we had been brought up in a different era, we'd have a completely different set of rules. Completely different. Even just being in a different family, we have different standards and rules. So we can tell that these things are added to us. This is kind of going back to rule 2. What has arisen now as a disturbance is highlighting to us where we aren't free, where we're still conditioned by these past experiences. And quite often, it won't be the first time we've experienced this. We often see patterns, reactive patterns, coming into our lives when someone says a certain thing, when someone does a certain thing. And that's how we know it's kind of in us. It's not out there. Because they might do that to someone else and it doesn't matter. So it's kind of, there's a sense that we depersonalize this situation. We don't take this thought, this feeling, we honor it, but we don't take it so seriously, like it's permanent or like it's necessarily absolutely true. Because it's very particular to our pattern. How we react in any given moment is just it's our line through time, and a number of variables could have changed that. So we have to honor it. It's real, it's there, but it's very insubstantial. But that takes practice. We can't let go of deep-rooted conditioned beliefs. We start to let go of the things that happen in this moment. And that's what's so beautiful about a mindfulness practice, because it allows us to play with our experience a little bit, to practice developing this awareness, creating this space in our experience, slowing things down and going, actually, oh, there's that thought again. So then we get lost for a bit and we come back and go, oh, there I was. No, that's that thought again. And how did that make me feel? Actually, when I went through that little thought process about what that person said to me earlier or what I've got to do tomorrow, I actually now feel a bit more anxious than I did before. So we're noticing the sensation in the body and how our mind takes us away to places and then the body follows. Or it might be the body that's aching or sore, and then the mind responds to the body. Oh, it's that thing again. Might add a layer of conditioning in. But our job in the practice, it's not to go into the whys, it's simply to just observe, just to notice what's happening. And we do so with compassion, we do so with gentleness, and we do so without expectation or judgment, because if we're getting embroiled in any of those things, which we do, and I certainly do in my practice, we're just adding fuel to the fire. But then we can notice that and step back from that and go, okay, there I am again doing that thing, whatever that was. And right, there it goes again, and let it go. So sometimes, sometimes things, as I said before, sometimes things are really difficult, and we're not here to, climb Mount Everest, but we can just start to work on these little bits and pieces that are going on in this moment. And as I said, it's continuous. There's a continuous reaction to what's happening. And it takes a very subtle form of awareness to know this happening continuously. So we might think it's just who we are, but there's a rhythm of thoughts, a rhythm of feelings that happen. So that being said, we will get into the practice now. I think I've been talking for long enough there. So I'm just going to have a drink of water, actually. Before we go into the practice, has anyone got any questions about what I said, or didn't quite sit right with anyone, or maybe any objections? Or I don't necessarily want us going into the practice with, holding on to what was that bit? That wasn't quite right, or something. Otherwise, we can talk about all that afterwards. So we shall go for about, I guess, 20 minutes. Sometimes the time does get away from me, but we'll give that a go. 20-minute practice. And yeah, so just using the sound of the gong just to meet us where we are. So can we find a position that's comfortable? Not feeling like we have to strive for perfect posture. Just allowing ourselves to settle, allowing the body to settle. And as it is a bit later in the day, if we start to feel a little bit drowsy, we can always just lift the head a little bit, deepen the breaths a little bit, and do our best just to stay alert. But first of all comes being comfortable. And it's our intention during this practice to see if we can start to notice some of that flow of commentary, that subtle flow of judgment. And we can start to look at the characteristics of that, the tone of it. And we've all got our own motivation for being here today. So just taking just a second just to check in with that. Honestly asking ourselves, why am I here today? And being open to whatever arises. Maybe there's more than one reason, or maybe there isn't any today. We can have the eyes closed, or we can just gaze lightly forward. And we can begin to tune in to the breath, allowing our focus to narrow on the part of the body where we notice breathing the most. So our awareness or attention is like a torchlight, and we just gently narrow it onto the sensations of breathing. And we may feel that in the nose or the throat or the chest or the belly. We may just feel a general sense of the body breathing. We may ask ourselves, how do I know I'm breathing at the moment? And then we allow our attention to rest and settle on that area. So we commit to focusing on this one area. And that's our only job, is just to bring our attention as close as we can to this sensation of breathing. Noticing how it arises and falls away. How each in-breath has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that turns into the beginning, middle, and end of the out-breath. In a continuous flow. And we can even deepen that breath a little bit. And just start to build an even flow of breath. So we can count the inhale. 3 or 4 on the inhale, and then matching that on the exhale. This doesn't have to be perfect. We're just aiming to build a nice, gentle, even rhythm of breath. And we may have noticed already that the mind is itching to get away. It's itching to focus on other things. So many tempting thoughts. So if we notice we've become distracted, if we've lost ourselves somewhere, then we just gently draw our attention back to the breath, back to this even flow, this counting if you're counting. And just do our best just to stay here. And we can let go of that counting process. We can allow the breath to return to its normal, natural flow. And we pay a little bit more attention to the exhale and just notice how the body feels as we let go of the breath. As the body lets go of the breath, can we notice any sensations relating to that? Do the shoulders soften? Does the chest relax? There's no wrong answers here. This is just breath by breath, our experience as it unfolds. And can we give the mind permission to let go of thinking in the same way that the body lets go of the breath? And we can bring our awareness deeper into the body. We may notice a sensation of our feet on the floor. If we've got shoes and socks on, we may feel the contact of those against our skin, the weight of our feet on the floor. Maybe the weight of our seat on the chair. Or any particular sensations that are present. Maybe a slight discomfort, an itch or a niggle. And perhaps just giving our body permission just to be relaxed, without forcing it, without expecting it. Just letting go of what wants to let go. And in expanding our awareness to include the body, but to also include the space around us. So we tune into this body in this place, in this environment. And can we tune into any sounds? Maybe it's really quiet, maybe just use the sound of my voice, or maybe there's some distracting noises. But can we notice the characteristics of the sound, how they arise and fall and arise and fall in their own time, without any effort on our behalf? We're just receiving sounds. And in the same way, can we notice any mental noise, any kind of narrative, any kind of commentary, or any voice, an inner voice that wants to label? Any questions arising in the mind? And we take this same position of openly receiving the sound of these thoughts. Might be that we go, oh, my mind is very, very quiet at the moment. And can we notice that voice that says it? Can we notice that commentary? Maybe the mind is busy. Maybe it's wandering around and we can't pick anything out. Maybe we can just notice that's what it's like right now. Are we slipping forward or back in time with thoughts earlier today, or what comes next? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just opening and noticing. Any mental activity at all. Might even be a sensation. What sensations are present? Can we notice how the mind labels a sensation? There's quite often a label and then an accompanying judgment. I like this sensation. I don't like this sensation. That's a nice thought. That's a bad thought. Oh, I'm distracted again. I'm a terrible meditator, or I'm not getting this. I don't understand what's going on. Whatever it is this landscape. It's just this landscape of awareness. Again, sound's going to sound. What does the mind do with the sound as it comes up? I like that sound. I don't like that sound. That sounds distracting. Spending the next couple of minutes just in silence, exploring this whole landscape. Sounds, thoughts, sensations. And if the mind is wandering off, if we feel like we've been pulled away, can we notice how we respond to that moment? As awareness recognizes that the mind has wandered, what's the tone of that relationship? kind of language are we using to ourselves? Is there a critical tone to it, or a kind, understanding tone? Is there any familiar patterns arising? And maybe we notice that we're a little bit harsher than ourselves than we need to be. Because it's the mind's job to wonder. That's what it does. So we don't need to beat ourselves up for it. It's just happening. Just notice. And then we might take a moment to reflect on how we relate to ourselves in that moment. Noticing if there's any layers, if there's any questions popping up. And then beginning to let go of the practice, let go of any form of inquiry or any doing. So we're just resting again. And then if it's comfortable to do so, either taking hold of your opposite hand or placing the hand on the chest. And just feeling that contact, that touch. And just taking a moment to dedicate any benefits of this practice, any patience, any care, any calmness, any awareness or insight. And dedicating that to all the people in need of it right now. Just spreading some benefits to those who might be in need. And reflecting on how that feels. And allowing those benefits to shine back on us as well in this moment. And however the practice has gone, not judging ourselves, just noticing that this is how it is right now, this is how it's been. And taking the next couple of minutes just to come back to our environment, to the sound of the gong.